16-2. Clemson ranked number 11 in this week's AP Top 25. Visits Boston College tomorrow, while number 14, Louisville, is home against Cal. Duke closes out the regular season on Saturday against North Carolina. The Tar Heels and SMU are tied at 12-6 in the conference. SMU's home against Syracuse tonight, while the Tar Heels visit Virginia Tech. Number 3, Houston won its 9th straight, a 65-59 win over Kansas. L.J. Cryer had 22 points. The Cougars have wins in 22 of 23. Bundle auto and home, renters, or condo, and save with Progressive. That's the Sports Grid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Confidence is knowing you're ready to handle whatever comes your way. That's what it feels like to take on your workday with Cintas. They make sure your AEDs are up to date, your fire extinguishers are tested and inspected, your floor mats are cleaned and delivered, and your workwear looks good, feels good, and is freshly laundered with the Cintas Apparel Plus program. So are you ready to take on today? Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
I had the worst dream last night. You were in a car crash and the kids and I were on our own. We had to move out of the house because I couldn't afford it anymore.
That's awful, hon.
My brother was saying he got life insurance from Ethos. With Ethos, it only took 10 minutes and he got $2 million in coverage for around $2 a day. It's all online. No medical exam. He just answered a few health questions right from his house.
Ethos, here we come.
Visit getethos.com. That's getethos.com.
Sample rate is a 10-year term life policy for 35-year-old healthy, non-smoking male. Billed monthly.
How many SportsGrid listeners does it take to change a light bulb?
It takes 2.
One to change the light bulb, and one to see if our mobile app can provide the same amount of light. Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle, it is FFC. He is the mastermind of the pigskin. That would be Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. An important day around the National Football League that we will break down for you here on Sports Grid Radio in Sirius XM Channel 159. 4 p.m. Eastern Time, Lisi. It is franchise tag and transition tag deadline day in the NFL. If there is a player currently on your favorite team's roster and they want to be placed under the tag, it has to happen in the next 4 hours. We already have some news to break down ahead of tag deadline day. We will do that here on FFC, what it means for the remainder of this offseason. Plenty to get to today over this next hour up until 1 p.m. Eastern.
We'll see how certain teams approach, their star players in regards to signing them, franchise tagging them. We saw T. Higgins the other day go on the market with the franchise tag, and we'll see what plays out, right? So this is where, right, leading up, we're right after the combine. We're about a month and a half from the draft day. This is where teams start to formulate and form their rosters, players that they want to keep, players that they want to obviously sign to long-term extensions, and we'll see exactly how it plays out. But from the gambling perspective as well, Ben, you can get a gauge about which teams are serious contenders and which ones potentially are walking through the motions without a plan for the upcoming season.
Absolutely so, Joe. And we know some of those plans, and we have known the offseason plan in Cincinnati as Lisi laid out yesterday. It was made official for a second consecutive offseason. The Bengals have placed the franchise tag on T. Higgins 2 years in a row. Joe, the Bengals have told us their plan this offseason is to pay everybody to keep that young trio in-house. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase at the wide receiver spots, in Trey Hendrickson, the defensive lineman who finished runner-up for Defensive Player of the Year. And the Bengals did understand that part of that was placing the non-exclusive franchise tag on T. Higgins so that he would not become a free agent at the end of his 5th year in Cincinnati after being on the franchise tag this past year, so he cannot test his true waters in the free agency market to see his appropriate value. The Bengals would place him on the tag to keep him in-house and have that negotiating upper hand. Well, the Bengals have now done that. But last year, Joe, when Cincy placed the tag on T. Higgins, there wasn't much of a negotiation. It was basically, here's the franchise tag. You can play under it or you can sit out, but we're not looking for that long-term deal. This year, the Bengals have said otherwise. We are placing T. Higgins on the tag so we can work and further negotiate for that long-term contract extension. It takes a lot of trust to believe the Bengals at their word.
It does. And last year was completely different to your point, but he stepped up. He had a great season considering the circumstances. He was focused. And he basically, was a major part while that team won 9 football games down the stretch, right? 9-8 overall. But when you hear Joe Burrow come out and you hear their star quarterback say that it's imperative for both Jamar Chase and T. Higgins to be a part of the offense for 2025, that adds a little bit more pressure to the GM. That adds more pressure on the organization to make the appropriate moves to sign T. Higgins to a long-term deal. It was almost like, well, show us you could play under the franchise tag. He did it last year, and now it's like, okay, now we have to ante up. And now with our star quarterback vying for that, we have to make everybody happy to compete in the AFC. So we'll see. Again, I told you, they put him on the franchise tag a couple of days ago. That's fine, but do not allow this to just, linger throughout the offseason where T. Higgins wants to be checked out or has second thoughts about being on the team for the upcoming season.
And that's the key, Joe, right? I think T. Higgins is aware of what the Bengals' plan is, but this is not to be dragged out. This is not to be a lollygagged negotiation. This needs to happen quickly, but that's part of the issue in Cincy, so we'll get to that in just a moment. Technically, this could be a dragged-out timeline. Players placed under the franchise tag have until July 15th to agree to a long-term deal with their NFL club. If not, they will play under the franchise tag or can rework a short-term 1-year deal that kind of looks like the franchise tag. But really, that is what is at case, Joe. It could go all the way through the summer, May, June, July, right before training camp. That would be bad business, but there is the potential of that happening. If Cincinnati is smart, that will not be the case. And Joe, T. Higgins did play under the franchise tag. For most of the offseason last year, we debated, would T. Higgins play? Would he show up in 2024 for the Bengals? He did. He was injured to start the year, started 9 games, only played in 12 in total, and Joe balled out down the stretch for Cincy as they were trying to make that last-second push to a playoff spot. In only 9 starts, 73 receptions, 911 yards, 10 touchdowns. He was as good as Jamar Chase down the stretch, and Jamar Chase had a record-setting Triple Crown season, leading the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Both superstar wideouts for Cincinnati basically looked at the front office and said, you wanted to see if I was worth it? Well, here you go.
Yeah, and he's a different type of wide receiver than Jamar Chase, right? Jamar Chase, pure route runner, could take the top off the secondary. T. Higgins, a bigger body, catches the football at its highest point. So now you have the best of both worlds if you're Joe Burrow. And you're right, 73 receptions, 900 yards. He had a 3-touchdown performance down the stretch to help win a game. So at the end of the day, and think about this, he's not an outspoken player in the sense of disgruntled. He hasn't shown that he won't play or that he's completely invested in terms of the franchise. The kid wants to play for Cincinnati. All he's asking is give him his true value so that way he could go out there with the likes of some of the other great wide receivers in the conference. It's like Cincinnati is taking a wait-and-see approach, and now their back is against the wall. And without T. Higgins, then they have to get another number 2 that they're going to have to pay anyway. So I just don't understand. Why not just pay T. Higgins? He has the same agent as Jamar Chase. Lock them both up and just move on.
And, Joe, that will be the issue for Cincinnati. And that is where the Bengals have shot themselves in the foot because they did not pay either wide receiver last offseason. They tagged T. Higgins. They did not have the foresight to early extend Jamar Chase entering his 4th year of his rookie deal and now ahead of his 5th and final year under his rookie contract. They are back at the negotiating table because they did not have the frugal foresight to understand they could have set the wide receiver market for Jamar Chase and are now playing catch up after the market was set in a record-setting way for Justin Jefferson. And the Bengals have said they are going to reset it again. They have to add money on to the $35 million per year for Justin Jefferson with $110 million guaranteed. And Joe, they're going to pay Jamar Chase the most money we have ever seen for a non-quarterback. And then T. Higgins at the same time, also in those long-term negotiations, is going to be like, well, you think this guy is $5, $6, $7 million a year better than I am? That's not going to rub him the right way by any means, even though he is going to see a pay increase. And at least the guy T. Higgins, under the franchise tag for 2025, would make $26.2 million. It's a lot of money. Everybody understands that. But it's about market value in the NFL, respective to the other greats at your position. 6 wide receivers currently make $30+ million per year. If T. Higgins hit the open market, it'd probably be $32, $33 million per year because of the salary cap on the rise. So the Bengals need to pay him that, and they need to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-QB in NFL history. And don't forget about Trey Hendrickson. And that's if you want to build up a defense that can actually be a Super Bowl contender. There's a lot to break down with the Bengals. We'll continue the conversation up next.
4 out of 5 scientists agree it's smarter to be on SportsGrid. And we're pretty sure that one scientist is still a virgin. He just gives that vibe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Federal authorities in Los Angeles arrested 2 alleged leaders of a criminal organization suspected of smuggling 20,000 people from Guatemala to the U.S. and charging each person as much as $18,000 to get them into the country. Eduardo Domingo Renajmatul, known as Turco, and his lieutenant Cristobal Mejia Chaz were taken into custody Friday. They have each pleaded not guilty to multiple charges related to smuggling migrants across the border over 5 years. A federal judge ordered the men, who themselves are in the country illegally, jailed without bond until their trial in April. A federal court has ruled that a group of lobster fishermen can sue one of the world's largest seafood watchdog groups for defamation over a report that described Maine lobster as an unwise choice for consumers. The threat to a rare whale species from getting tangled in fishing gear has prompted Monterey Bay Aquarium in California to caution against eating a variety of lobster that New England fishermen have harvested for centuries. I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
Confidence is knowing you're ready to handle whatever comes your way. That's what it feels like to take on your workday with Cintas. They make sure your AEDs are up to date, your fire extinguishers are tested and inspected, your floor mats are cleaned and delivered, and your workwear looks good, feels good, and is freshly laundered with the Cintas Apparel Plus program. So are you ready to take on today? Visit Cintas.com.
Oh, I'm ready!
And get ready for the workday.
With Progressive, renters can save on protection for the things that make your place yours, even things that don't make sense to everyone.
People always wonder why I don't get rid of my guitar since I never play. But it's like, what if I actually end up taking lessons? Sure, I've had it for 8 years, but if I get rid of it, then what will my New Year's resolution be next January?
Exactly. So bundle your renters and auto and save with Progressive and protect the things that make sense to you. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and affiliates and other insurers not available in all states or situations. Covered subject to policy terms and conditions.
There's something you should know and always remember. SportsGrid does not increase luck. We're your unfair advantage for the latest sports gaming information. If you're looking for luck, go find a horseshoe. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. So the facts of the case for T. Higgins placed under the franchise tag ahead of tag deadline day, which is this Tuesday afternoon around the National Football League. $26.2 million is what T. Higgins would be set to receive if he plays under the franchise tag for the 2025 NFL season. Joe, it sounds like a lot of money, and it absolutely is. But in terms of fair market value for one of the best wide receivers currently in the NFL, it's nowhere close. 6 guys make $30 million plus per year if T. Higgins were to become a free agent this offseason, and the Bengals had not placed him under the tag. He would certainly get $30 million with guaranteed money and would certainly probably be closer to $32+ million. None of the franchise tag salary for a season is fully guaranteed. But, Joe, it's not just a benefit for T. Higgins to sign a long-term extension, guaranteed money up front, and, of course, probably a larger annual average salary. It actually would be fiscally beneficial for Cincinnati as a whole. When you place somebody under the tag, that's it. The salary value is the cap hit. When you give somebody a long-term extension or you agree to a new contract, you can work the contract to pay T. Higgins more in signing bonuses up front, some deferred money at the end, guaranteed money to make the financial burden on the organization not nearly as much and not eat up nearly as much cap room, which, of course, Joe, is since he is looking to pay Jamar Chase a record-setting deal and Trey Hendrickson a lot of money, that, of course, would benefit the Bengals to also not have T. Higgins play under the franchise tag.
Yeah, I mean, yes, and you and I have talked about this all week, right? You know, if we're talking which one do you prioritize first, Hendrickson or Higgins? I told you I think it's T. Higgins. You know, get Chase, get Higgins signed, and the defense could worry about it. And I know the defense is important. They were absolutely atrocious though last year. You know, and I know that they outscored teams and the defense allowed them to lose 8 games last year. But you still have a better shot of getting back to the playoffs and making an AFC championship game with T. Higgins and Jamar Chase happy as opposed to Trey Hendrickson. And I understand he led the NFL in sacks, but he should be the last person that you prioritize. Do we really expect them to be? Yeah. Do we expect them to be like the Eagles this year defensively? No. Could they be above average? Sure. But they have much more concerns on defense than they do at offense. If I have that constant, juggernaut on the offensive side of the ball, as an organization, it's like, okay, we could worry about the defense now. If I have concerns on both, now I'm just spinning my wheels in neutral.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, right? But to be a true conference contender for Cincinnati, that defense needs to be so much better than it was a season ago. So not only do you have to pay Trey Hendrickson, you're going to need to fill out the roster outside of that. Jermaine Pratt, who has been with the Bengals for 6 years, also not happy, seeking a trade at this moment, which again is why you need some of that financial flexibility, and it actually benefits the Bengals, as crazy and backwards as that might sound, to pay T. Higgins more in annual average value, but not pay as much up front for that cap hit if you give him the long-term deal and not under the franchise tag. Joe, you've mentioned it a few times. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase have the same representation. They have the same agent. This report yesterday from Diana Rossini that Jamar Chase and the Bengals are negotiating as we speak, that Cincinnati aims to make Jamar Chase the highest paid non-quarterback in NFL history, and yet has put an offer out there, and the two sides are still very far apart. The Bengals have not done this with foresight. They could have not had this been the case. They could have gotten in front of this and not have all of these tabs due at the same time. But, Joe, that, of course, is not the case in Cincinnati. Buyer's remorse, and they are going to have to spend. But the idea that Cincinnati is going to figure this all out seamlessly this offseason and pay everybody, I would say, is off to a little bit of a shaky start.
Yeah, I mean, that's not a good sign. I mean, you would think that they would have the number already in place. Like Justin Jefferson got this, Jamar Chase is worthy of this. He had a record-breaking season, signed, sealed, and delivered, and let's worry about T. Higgins. The fact that they're so far, they're playing hardball with their number one wide receiver, the best player outside of Joe Burrow on the offense. I mean, what are they doing? This organization is in shambles if that's the case. I wouldn't want to play for that organization. You produce and you're still not getting your money, and they're disrespecting you that far off is a joke.
It is. It's tough, Joe, because Jamar Chase said, all right, you're not going to pay me with foresight. We have said it so many times. They could have set the market. They wouldn't have to wait to see what the Vikings paid Justin Jefferson and either match it or now have to increase and raise what Minnesota paid Jay Jet. Jamar Chase also said, all right, you're not going to pay me. You're not going to average out this deal over the final 2 years of my rookie contract. with the extension, okay, I'll go out there and give you one of the best seasons an NFL wide receiver has ever delivered in the history of this sport, which is what he did as a Triple Crown winner, leading the NFL in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. And Joe, just so it's known, to match Justin Jefferson or to make Jamar Chase the highest paid wide receiver and non-quarterback ever, that's more than $35 million per year, and that's more than $110 million guaranteed, which is what the Vikings paid Justin Jefferson last offseason.
And it's worth it, right? I mean, the guy clearly is their best player. Justin Jefferson has stepped up in every big performance, right? The only reason what you can make the argument that Justin Jefferson didn't step up is because Sam Darnold was inconsistent in the two biggest games of the regular season and the playoffs. So outside of that, Justin Jefferson's the real deal. Jamar Chase is the real deal. And your star quarterback is begging you to sign these guys. What are they doing? I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. They're a joke.
It's mismanagement. It could have been avoided. You could have had some foresight. And at the end of this offseason, even if it takes until June or July, the Bengals do accomplish their task of giving a long-term deal to Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and Trey Hendrickson. Don't pat them on the back or give them a round of applause. They messed this up to begin with. More FFC next.
There's smart and there's not smart. Not smart is hope as a strategy. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid. Keep it here and win. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. The SportsGrid Radio Network presents This Date in Sports History.
In 1927, Babe Ruth becomes the highest paid player in MLB history when he signs a 3-year, $210,000 deal with the Yankees.
Look at it go, my God! Look at it go!
Ruth hit a Major League best 60 home runs in 1927. When told he made more than the U.S. president, he said, well, I had a better year than he did. For SportsGrid Radio, I'm Mike DeMurgis.
The Technology Minute with George Capalbo.
The University of Copenhagen's new AI machine learning model can understand the emotional state of animals just by listening to them. With 89.4% accuracy, it acoustically distinguishes positive and negative emotions from 7 different species, including cows,
It's a beautiful day.
pigs,
Stop stealing my slop.
and even wild boars.
Have you ever had one of those days?
This breakthrough universal animal emotion translator, a game changer for barnyard quality of life.
You're standing on my foot.
Follow me at G Capalbo on X and stay tuned to the Technology Minute for more cool stuff like this.
Money line.
Cooler heads prevailed. Stafford stays in LA.
Yeah, not as much of a fan as it for you. I think the Rams are wildly overrated. Since winning the Super Bowl, they've won 5 games, 10 games, and 10 games. Anyone who acts like they're some perennial Super Bowl contender is basically Joe Lisi, or people who lie to themselves because they are not that.
Catch Moneyline with Donnie Rightside and Kevin Walsh. Weekdays, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 Pacific. On the SportsGrid Radio Network. Wherever you go, there you are. Download the SportsGrid mobile app and we'll be right there with you. So now you can get the winning edge anywhere. Even while the wife's talking to you. If you've got an earbud. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle on FFC. It is SportsGrid Radio. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. Lisi, guys, some news on tag deadline day. This is why you franchise tag a player to begin negotiations to hopefully agree to a long-term deal as rapidly as possible. Because earlier over the weekend, the Cowboys did place the franchise tag on interior defensive lineman, their D tackle, Osa Odighizuwa. They placed the franchise tag on him, but as negotiations were already beginning. So Odighizuwa could not test the open market to see what that value truly is. Regardless, the Cowboys and Odighizuwa have agreed to a new deal. 4-year, $80 million with $52 million guaranteed. Odighizuwa, 26 years old, has started all 17 games in the regular season, each of the last 3 years for Dallas, coming off a career-best 4.5 sacks along the interior of that D-line for the Cowboys this past season. So, with some foresight and maybe a little bit of haste this time around, Jerry Jones and the Cowboys get a long-term extension done early in the offseason, not letting it drag out.
Yeah, and one of the more consistent players on defense. That defense was terrible down the stretch. They were terrible against the run, against some of the better teams in terms of the NFC and AFC. And now you sign him to a long-term deal to solidify the middle, right? That should open up things for Micah Parsons and the outside. And obviously Micah Parsons is another player that they have to prioritize in terms of the offseason. Get him signed, Iggy, right? And then all of a sudden now you can move on to bigger and better things, especially for a first-year head coach. Jerry would be doing an honest disservice to Kellen Moore and that staff if he didn't sign these players sooner rather than later and move them on in respect to the locker room and the continuity. If you allow these things to linger throughout the offseason, then you have a locker room that's disassembled, that's not in tune, and a first-year head coach, it's a big problem.
Yeah, just to clarify, Brian Schottenheimer. But I also messed up as well, so we own our mistakes here on FFC. The Cowboys, the update over the weekend was that Dallas planned to utilize the franchise tag on Osa Odighizuwa had they not reached a deal by this tag deadline day in Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern. So the franchise tag was actually not placed on Odighizuwa, but they were able to agree to a long-term deal before it because of the deadline looming. And just to show why the franchise tag doesn't actually benefit the NFL organization in terms of the financials is because the franchise tag for a defensive lineman this year is a little bit more than $25 million. So on that annual average value, Odighizuwa only making $20 million per year, but gets $52 million guaranteed up front. He's good. More cap space for Jerry Jones and the Cowboys after having paid Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb last offseason, and certainly going to have to pay Micah Parsons this offseason. That was a good move by the Dallas Cowboys, not something that we often say. So good news for Osa Odighizuwa and Dallas and how this was done. But as you wait, franchise tag actually does not benefit an organization. And Joe, I do just want to say, last year, 9 guys were placed under the franchise tag or transition tag. So far this year, just 2. Trey Smith in Kansas City, T. Higgins in Cincinnati. And I'm just going to pass this off to Joe right now because hand up, technical issues here in the studio. Want to make sure we get that handled.
Yeah, we talk about, big signings in regards to Dallas and other teams. And if you look at the Cowboys, big picture, they're a team that obviously has to make some moves. Schottenheimer and this team have a win total probably in the area of about 7.5 to 8.5. Dak Prescott comes back. And this is a team that when you just look at it big picture, are they on the same level now as the Philadelphia Eagles and, more importantly, the up-and-coming Washington Commanders that just signed Deebo Samuel to that offense? I don't believe so. I think that you look at this team as a whole, offensively and defensively, for the Dallas Cowboys, and I think there's major concerns. There's concerns about Dak Prescott. There's concerns about the defense. And I just think there's concerns about the ownership as well with Jerry Jones. It's almost like a similar situation with Daniel Snyder. Until Snyder moved on, that organization won. Could be the same with Jerry and Big D, and we'll see how it plays out.
And, Joe, as I was saying, 9 guys under the tag last year. 8 of the 9 received a long-term deal. The only person who did not is under the franchise tag once again. That is T. Higgins. Trey Smith tagged by KC. They are hoping for a long-term extension as well. It would be frugal for Kansas City to get that done. Plenty more on Football Full Circle, including Minnesota's QB situation. Next.
The winning edge. You've got it. But not everybody has it, because not everybody listens to us. But we're working on that. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Progressive presents the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders. Shea Gilgeous-Alexander put up 51 points, helping the Thunder to their 50th win of the season, a 137-128 final over Houston. Oak City's won 4 in a row in 8 of 10. They matched the Cavaliers in wins. Cleveland is 50-10 atop the Eastern Conference. They're on the road tonight visiting the Bulls. NFL, the Bengals have put the franchise tag on wide receiver T. Higgins for the second straight year. Reports say the Vikings likely won't put the franchise tag on Sam Darnold. Baseball spring training, the Astros say Jose Altuve will play mostly in left field this year. He's a 9-time All-Star, a 3-time batting champion, and the 2017 AL MVP. All but 2 of his more than 1,700 games in the majors have come at second base. Atlanta starting catcher Sean Murphy will miss 4 to 6 weeks with a rib injury. Bundle auto and home, renters, or condo and save with Progressive. That's the SportsGrid Sports Flash. I'm Chuck Sanders.
Oh, could this vintage store be any cuter?
Right? And the best part? They accept Discover.
Accept Discover? In a little place like this? I don't think so, Jennifer.
Oh, yeah, huh? Discover's accepted where I like to shop. Come on, baby, get with the times.
Right, so we shouldn't get the parachute pants?
These are making a comeback. I think.
Discover is accepted at 99% of places that take credit cards nationwide. Based on the February 2024 Nielsen report.
I had the worst dream last night. You were in a car crash and the kids and I were on our own. We had to move out of the house because I couldn't afford it anymore.
That's awful, hon.
My brother was saying he got life insurance from Ethos. With Ethos, it only took 10 minutes and he got $2 million in coverage for around $2 a day. It's all online. No medical exam. He just answered a few health questions right from his house.
Ethos, here we come.
Visit getethos.com. That's getethos.com.
Sample rate is a 10-year term life policy for 35-year-old healthy, non-smoking male. Billed monthly.
You're listening to SportsGrid.
Spreading the winning edge far and wide.
Terrestrial, internet, TV, satellite, and don't forget our mobile app.
Face it.
The winning edge is everywhere.
Somewhere there's a squirrel frustrated he can't get a phone.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on FFC, it is Football Full Circle. He is Joe Lisi. I am Ben Stevens. Lisi, guys, we start to break things down around franchise tag deadline day in the NFL. By 4 p.m. Eastern time, we do not expect to see the Minnesota Vikings place the franchise tag on quarterback Sam Darnold. There was maybe some thought they would do so. Seemed unlikely, however, because the franchise tag value for a quarterback is north of $40 million. And to place Darnold under the tag to be in a quarterback battle alongside J.J. McCarthy or end up as your backup quarterback to the tune of $40 million just doesn't make a lot of fiscal sense. The Vikings say they remain interested in bringing Darnold back if they can, but more than likely, Joe, it signifies the end of the one-year run for Sam Darnold with the Vikings.
Yeah, he had his shot. He had 2 games against the Rams, and he had the other shot against Detroit, and he failed miserably, and you can't take that risk, for $45 million in year number 2, right? You just can't do it. If he would have performed well and the team still would have lost, you could have made that type of assessment or risk, but not now, knowing that how bad he played, how bad they lost, and knowing that you have a young second-year quarterback that could potentially start and maybe develop over the next few seasons. So we'll see. Where does Sam Darnold go? Does he go to Las Vegas? Does he go to Tennessee? I guess those are 2 landing spots. But again, it's very limited in terms of where he can go and where the money fits. So again, I think he can be a starter, but he's not going to change an organization from, he did change Minnesota, but part of that is they had elite wide receiver talent as well. Going to a team like Tennessee or going to a team like Las Vegas, I think that's it. I think they're middle 500 type of teams right there at best.
Yeah, we'll talk about the potential landing spots for Sam Darnold. But, Joe, you are right. The 2 biggest games of the year for the Vikings were the 2 worst performances out of what was otherwise a career season for Sam Darnold, his 7th year in the National Football League. And every year, Joe, that he had played double-digit games around the NFL with the Jets and the Panthers, it was the most passing yards he had ever had, the most passing touchdowns, and outside of one season, the fewest amount of interceptions in the 4 previous years he played double digit games. It was a great season in Minnesota, there is no doubt. He led the Vikings to a 14-3 record, but a costly performance in a game that could have won them the division against the Lions in the opening round bye in the postseason, and a poor performance in that wild card round against the LA Rams. I think, Joe, it kind of called into question once again the future for Sam Darnold as a successful NFL starting quarterback in terms of elevating a franchise, raising a ceiling for whatever organization, right? He can go somewhere, be a part of a 6, 7, 8 win football team, but does Sam Darnold actually move the needle enough to make a mediocre team a playoff contender into a conference championship contender? I think that is where the doubt and the questions are at this moment. And Minnesota already had the plan in place for J.J. McCarthy, who they drafted 10th overall last April in the 2024 NFL draft. This was supposed to be the recipe this year. Sam Darnold providing that veteran experience to groom McCarthy and bring him along to make him the starter early on into 2024. Wasn't the case, of course, because of McCarthy's torn meniscus in the opening preseason game in Minneapolis. But this is J.J. McCarthy's show. This is J.J. McCarthy's franchise, for better or worse. So then, Joe, the natural question is, Sam Darnold, what happens next and how much does he receive? Another reason I don't think the Vikings are bringing him back. Sam Darnold, although there might be questions about the ceiling of his play, I still think he's going to get $25, $30 million at least on the open market per year. It's just where the quarterback value is at the moment. And then you mentioned a couple of those teams. I don't think the Titans are going to make the move unless they really move out of the draft, because they do have the number 1 overall pick right now. But my thoughts would be the Raiders and the Steelers probably as your front runner.
Yeah, and then I guess you could tickle in the Giants if you want to throw it in there.
Yeah.
Maybe, just as a potential bridge gap quarterback, especially if they draft a younger quarterback coming out of the draft. But you're right. There's a very limited amount of teams that would make sense for Sam Darnold. He can't go back to the Jets, so throw that out the window, right? He's not going to go to Tennessee, to your point, because they have the number 1 overall pick. And why would you go to a journeyman when you have a complete rebuild to develop the pure number 1, whether it be Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders or whoever they pick? So, yeah. I think that's right. It's either Las Vegas, it's the Giants, and maybe the Steelers. But again, here's the thing. He performed well in a dome in Minnesota. If you're the Steelers, you're going to go with Sam Darnold in Pittsburgh? I mean, possibly, but I would want somebody who's a little bit more battle-tested in terms of cold weather elements. He couldn't perform in MetLife. The kid's going to step up in Pittsburgh and perform and take this team to a championship. I just don't see it.
Yeah, and Joe, that's really the story, right? Let's start with the Pittsburgh Steelers, a team that made the playoffs a year ago that will now have a new starting quarterback more than likely in 2025. And we know the story under Mike Tomlin, now 18 years, never a losing record, never fewer than 8 wins, and a bunch of playoff appearances, even though they have not played in the AFC title game since 2016. Does Sam Darnold change that outlook in the Steel City? Does a Pittsburgh team that won double-digit games a year ago now look to be a 12-win team and an AFC North contender and an AFC championship contender because they add Sam Darnold? Probably not, right? Does he move the needle that much for a contending team? Probably not. Let's say he ends up in Las Vegas or with the New York Giants. Again, the two teams at 200-1 to win Super Bowl 60 in 2025. Does he make a team probably with a 4.5 or 5.5 win total? A 7 or 8 win football team? Maybe. But that feels to me, Joe, to be a more desirable spot for Darnold and a more comfortable landing spot as well. Go to a mediocre franchise, help them be stable, perform well where the expectation and the idea of lifting a ceiling will not nearly be as paramount or desirable in those spots.
Yeah, I mean, I think a perfect spot, for Darnold, if the opportunity was there, would have been the Rams, right? If Stafford moved on to potentially the Giants or some other team like we were hearing, I think, paired with Sean McVay in that type of offense where there's multiple playmakers, Darnold could be effective. But again, yes, I think a team like the Raiders will take a shot on him, depending upon what Tom Brady and Pete Carroll feel is the best option to maybe win some games in year number one. And then the other is the Steelers. We heard that Mike Tomlin's going to make a decision about Justin Fields' future, whether that means he'll stay or go. We'll see. But again, you're really limited. I mean, does he go to the Colts to challenge Anthony Richardson? Is that a role that he would want? Maybe. I don't know. Yeah. It's possible. That would be an outside shot, because if you're the Colts, you have Jonathan Taylor, you have Pittman, you have some good wide receiver talent. If AR can't live up to expectations by, let's say, game 6 or 7, at least you could turn to Darnold to maybe pull out the season.
And that will be interesting, Joe, right? Because the Colts have already shared. Anthony Richardson is going to be in a quarterback competition with insert XQB to be named later. Not exactly the strongest indictment on how optimistic Indy feels about AR's future entering his 3rd season and spending a 4th overall draft pick on him back in 2023, right? But I also do wonder then, how much does that mean for Sam Darnold? He came to Minnesota on a 1-year, $10 million deal after being the backup with the 49ers. That made sense. Backup quarterback, kind of grooming along a rookie QB, help in that experience process. If you're paying Sam Darnold $25, $30+ million, that to me, Joe, would be a price tag that says, we expect this guy to be QB number 1. More NFL news, including a trade, next.
We're not saying every SportsGrid listener is a legend, but you might start thinking about who's going to play you in the movie. Just saying. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.
Federal authorities in Los Angeles arrested 2 alleged leaders of a criminal organization suspected of smuggling 20,000 people from Guatemala to the U.S. and charging each person as much as $18,000 to get them into the country. Eduardo Domingo Renajmatul, known as Turco, and his lieutenant Cristobal Mejia Chaz were taken into custody Friday. They have each pleaded not guilty to multiple charges related to smuggling migrants across the border over 5 years. A federal judge ordered the men, who themselves are in the country illegally, jailed without bond until their trial in April. A federal court has ruled that a group of lobster fishermen can sue one of the world's largest seafood watchdog groups for defamation over a report that described Maine lobster as an unwise choice for consumers. The threat to a rare whale species from getting tangled in fishing gear has prompted Monterey Bay Aquarium in California to caution against eating a variety of lobster that New England fishermen have harvested for centuries.
I'm Trey Westerberg with the SportsGrid News Flash.
At Skechers, we put the S in comfort.
Wait. Skechers put the S in comfort?
Yes, comfort you have to feel to believe. Skechers, we put the S in comfort.
Let me try. Okay, I'm just stepping in and... Oh, wow. Skechers put the S in comfort.
Duh, we told you.
Find Skechers slip-ins at a Skechers store, Skechers.com, or wherever stylish footwear is sold.
What was that? That is business phone bliss with the Ooma Cloud Phone System. It handles all our voice, video, and messaging needs.
You sound very...
Calm? I am. Ooma has everything I need to handle the busy holiday season, like virtual receptionist, call routing, and video conferencing. And it starts at just $19.95 per month per user, plus taxes and fees.
Ooma.
Nice. Find your business comm at ooma.com/radio.
Ask any player and they'll tell you any advantage is important.
That's where we come in.
SportsGrid delivers gaming strategies and analysis 7 days a week.
The winning edge.
It's your advantage to more winning
more often.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Live right here on Football Full Circle. I said it right before the break. A trade in the NFL. The Chicago Bears are in the process of acquiring Jonah Jackson, veteran offensive lineman from the LA Rams, in exchange for a 2025 sixth-round pick, making its way back to LA. Jonah Jackson, one of the interior offensive linemen this past year for Los Angeles, really an injury-marred season, only played in 4 games for the Rams. His first year in LA, his 5th season in the NFL, spent his first 4 in Detroit, working with what offensive coordinator? That would be Ben Johnson, who, of course, is now the head coach in Chicago. So the Rams trade away Jonah Jackson to Chicago for a 6th-round pick in return. In Jonah Jackson's second year, Joe, in the NFL, in Detroit back in 2021, he was a Pro Bowler for the Lions, 3rd-round pick out of Ohio State, by the way of Rutgers. So a good deal for the Bears, whose main focus and priority this offseason will be bolstering that offensive line that allowed Caleb Williams to get sacked the most in the NFL in his rookie season in 2024.
Yeah, protect the franchise, right? You want to make sure that your quarterback is upright, not running for his life the way Caleb was doing as much of throughout the regular season as possible. We'll see, if he could solidify it. The rushing attack at times was above average with Roschon Johnson and DeAndre Swift. So, you talk about bringing a veteran to that offensive line and anchoring it. That's a huge, advantage entering the season. So, again, Ben Johnson knows what he wants to really have that type of offensive philosophy, the players that fit his type of scheme. He understands what he wants to develop there. And they have to hit the ground running. Ben Johnson has called out a number of teams in the NFC North. He's also got a quarterback that really has to elevate his play to the next level. And you have to do better than 4 or 5 wins this coming season.
And Joe, after a successful 4-year stint playing out the entirety of his rookie contract in Detroit, Jonah Jackson was a free agent at this time last offseason. Signed a 3-year, $51 million deal with the Rams. The Bears are going to take on that contract. Chicago, 3rd most amount of cap space, about $72 million this offseason. So not that they can't pay Jonah Jackson, but going to show they believe in this guy despite an injury-marred 4-game season in 2024. And Joe, when you look around the NFL, Caleb Williams, again, the most sacked quarterback, and it wasn't particularly close. 68 sacks. Caleb Williams specifically, individually, took a year ago. No other quarterback in the NFL was sacked more than 52 times. Second most was C.J. Stroud in Houston. Some of that was on Caleb, right? Some rookie indecisive decision-making, if you will, during his campaign, holding on to the football, trying to make hero ball type plays that he did at Oklahoma and USC. But a lot of that was on the offensive line. So the Bears, obviously, led by Ben Johnson, very comfortable with what they're getting in Jonah Jackson. Priority number 1, Joe, shoring up that O-line for Chicago this offseason. This is a big first step in doing so.
Yeah, and if you look at, a majority of the quarterbacks in the NFL, like rookies, that have success, right? Outside of Jaden Daniels, that has, great breakaway ability, and so does Caleb, but he's still a different type of runner than Jaden Daniels. You want to have that pocket. You want to have that pure pocket to build confidence, and you want to be able to run the football when you have to. So when you get an offensive lineman to help secure the middle and secure the interior line, that's a huge asset to have entering the season. Then you could put the playmakers around. You build a team in terms of a rebuild from the inside out. You build it in terms of the offense and defensive lines, and you build outside, right? So that's what they're doing right now. I think it's a solid move. Again, we talk about offensive line needs to have continuity. Just because they signed him and he's a veteran and he's produced in other areas doesn't always mean, though, that he'll come to the Bears and be a lights out, type of free agent or asset. Only time will tell, but it's sure a step in the right direction to elevating this offense this coming season, Ben.
So this trade happening right now, at least the reports of it, Joe, it will be a story we see here in the next week around the NFL. 1 week from tomorrow, the NFL league year for 2025 officially begins at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So the trade in about 8 days and a couple of hours from now is going to be made official between the Bears and the Rams. Again, league year starts exactly 1 week from tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern time. The negotiating window for free agency begins on Monday, 6 days from now. So you'll get some reports of some big news and transactions around the NFL. Nothing will be made official until 4 p.m. Eastern time a week from tomorrow. Have to enjoy what the Bears are doing there. So, Joe, that will be the story in Chicago at this moment. Another story that we shared last week on FFC is now no longer going to be told through the lens of Hard Knocks, the offseason edition of Hard Knocks, which was looking for a team, but after the Giants maybe peeled back the curtain a bit too much last offseason in terms of the Saquon Barkley negotiations, no NFL team really wanted to engage with NFL Films for the offseason edition. Bill Belichick, in his close relationship with NFL Films, was going to bring it to North Carolina this offseason. That has now been squashed for whatever reason. UNC will not be featured on the offseason edition of HBO's Hard Knocks.
Yeah, and if you're North Carolina, I would want this, right? So was it NFL Films and their side breaking down, because if you're Bill Belichick and you're, Mike Lombardi and the GM of North Carolina, and you want to obviously bring eyes and you want to bring recruits to your program, you would want the inside look. Hey, look at how we do it better than anybody, right? Look at all eyes front and center on Chapel Hill in the North Carolina football program. So it would seem like a win-win for the university and Bill Belichick trying to recruit talent, especially in the landscape of the transfer portal and NIL. Why it didn't happen, I think that's on the NFL film side. Maybe not enough money, or just maybe certain things they didn't agree to.
So we had reports last Friday that UNC was going to be the focus of Hard Knocks, but no contract was ever signed. Why did the deal fall through? We'll discuss on what CBS Sports Report had to say about it from Jonathan Jones. That's next on FFC.
Luck is winning the lottery. Strategy is settling your divorce before cashing in the ticket.
It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Get the winning edge. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. SportsGrid TV and radio networks are the premier streaming video and audio channels dedicated to serving the sports wagering audience. Found on major smart TV platforms and streaming on SportsGrid Radio and SiriusXM Channel 159. SportsGrid's real-time data, expert commentary, and entertaining analysis transform viewers into informed sports enthusiasts. Our weekday radio lineup begins with the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern with Ben Stevens and Donnie Rightside. Donnie joins Kevin Walsh on Moneyline at 11 a.m. Eastern, followed by Football Full Circle at noon Eastern. Kaplan and crew join the party at 1 p.m. Eastern, and Pharrell Coast to Coast keeps things rolling from 3 to 6 p.m. Eastern. Get in the mix with Kevin Walsh and Game Time Decisions at 6 p.m. Eastern. Evenings simmer with Carver and Lisi, then boils over with Gabe Moritzi on Sports Rage Late Night at 10 p.m. Eastern. To find out where to find SportsGrid that's best for you, go to sportsgrid.com. It's smarter to be on SportsGrid.
Imagine combining the exciting investment opportunity of cryptocurrencies with the power of artificial intelligence to maximize your IRA, 401k, or other investment funds. Listen, if you're looking for ways to accelerate your retirement growth, Block Trust IRA has market-leading strategies and solutions for all levels of investors, from $1,000 to millions. And they partner with Bitcoin Magazine's #1 crypto trading fund in the world to maximize your returns. Plus, their team of IRA specialists is here to help you roll over your IRA or qualified retirement account to the new world of cryptocurrency investments. So make this free call right now to set up your account and learn more.
800-434-5313. 800-434-5313. 800-434-5313. That's 800-434-5313.
Think of us as your cool roommate that has this innate gift of somehow always picking winners and never bugs you about doing the dishes or paying rent. Sports gaming strategies and information 24/7.
Get the winning edge.
This is the SportsGrid Radio Network. You're listening to Football Full Circle with Joe Lisi and Ben Stevens.
Football Full Circle. Ben will be back in the saddle tomorrow afternoon, talking about all the offseason talk. And one rumor has potentially the New York Giants trading up for Cam Ward as the top quarterback in the draft class. Brian Daboll and this team have been mentioned or rumored with Aaron Rodgers. And I think when you look at this team as a whole, they could go two ways. Brian Daboll and Joe Sheen have their backs against the wall. They have to surpass the win total have to be competitive? Do you get Aaron Rodgers in the building to potentially solidify this team with young offensive talent? You have Malik Neighbors, you have Wan'Dale Robinson, you have an above-average offense with Tyrone Tracy, and now you add a potential playmaker with Cam Ward in the offense. The biggest thing, I think, when you look at it, with Cam Ward, 4,300 passing yards, 39 touchdowns, 7 interceptions for Miami. He's an above-average quarterback. He stepped up, made plays in every single game for the Miami Hurricanes. When you look at Cam Ward as a whole compared to Shedeur Sanders, Cam Ward extends the pocket. He makes plays with his legs, similar to Jaden Daniels. And I think that's the difference if you're the New York Giants, if you have that potential quarterback or generational talent that you could trade up and get, especially in terms of the number 1 overall pick, giving up a little, getting Cam Ward and maybe signing a veteran quarterback, whether it be Aaron Rodgers or someone else. Now you have the ability not to just compete this year and be competitive, develop Cam Ward and maybe challenge the likes of Washington and Philadelphia and even Dallas over the next 2 or 3 seasons. When you look at Cam Ward, 39 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. A downside for Cam Ward at times is that he throws against his body. That could always be a cause of concern on the next level. But the ability also to extend plays with his legs. You saw Jaden Daniels do it, develop earlier in the year, even when he wasn't as acclimated in regards to the passing attack with Cliff Kingsbury. Jaden Daniels made plays with his legs and then developed throughout the regular season as a pocket passer. That's the biggest thing that Cam Ward could do in terms of his next level talent. And we'll see what the New York Giants do in about a month and a half in terms of their draft status. They are picking 3rd overall in this upcoming class. So we'll see. Do they go Travis Hunter or do they potentially trade up number 1 overall? The other news coming out of the NFL draft comes out of Dallas, and they had said that they're, rumor has it that they're not going to potentially take Ashton Genty, the running back coming out of the Boise State. They might potentially take a 2nd or a 3rd round running back. Rico Dowdle is the leading rusher on that team. It is interesting because when you look at this draft last year, Braylon Allen was hanging around in the 2nd and the 3rd and the 4th rounds, and the Dallas Cowboys had multiple opportunities to take Braylon Allen that had an above-average rookie season for the New York Jets, and they passed up on him. For whatever reason, they didn't sign Derrick Henry, and this potentially hurt the rushing attack and put more pressure on Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys as being a balanced offense. At times, Rico Dowdle and the offensive line did have consistent running back play in sporadic games, but it wasn't from the start of the season to the end, and that's why they missed out, and one of the reasons why they missed out on the playoffs. Another factor that we're hearing potentially, news coming out of LA, is that Sean McVay was shocked that Matt Stafford returned to the organization. Little bit of a head scratcher. If I'm the head coach and I know what's going on, I have to believe that in order to succeed in 2025, without a legitimate backup, Jimmy Garoppolo, Stetson Bennett, that I needed Matt Stafford on my team. The fact that Sean McVay was shocked that Stafford came back to the LA Rams really tells you that something might have been going on behind the scenes. Matt Stafford, we talk about it since he's won the Super Bowl 3 years ago. The team has won 5 games and then back-to-back 10-game winning seasons. They won the West last year. On paper, I think they're a little bit more complete right now based off of last year than the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers have the players. However, what's the continuity? What's the concerns about Christian McCaffrey and all of the playmakers that are potentially coming back like Brandon Ayuk? The fact that Sean McVay did not want or potentially know that Stafford wanted to come back, I don't know where this team is headed in 2025. We'll see you tomorrow on Football Full Circle. For Danny Ohlers, Ben Stevens, I'm Lisi. See you tomorrow.
Now you've done it.
You found the advantage for gaming, odds, and more. But we call it the winning edge for short. This is the SportsGrid Radio Network.